Hey, this is Rating Descending.
where we watch IMDb's worst 250 films so you don't have to.
I'm Michelle St. Clair.
I'm Abigail Ward.
And this week we're watching Twilight Saga New Moon. Edward leaves Bella after an attack that nearly claimed her life, and in her depression, she falls into yet another difficult relationship, this time with her close friend, Jacob Black. Let's watch. Yeah, I mean, how have you been?
Good. I just went for a blood test because of my ongoing mystery medical issues. But the pathologist was really sweet. Like, we had a really nice conversation, and obviously blood tests kind of suck, but I've done enough of them now, so it's not a big issue. And afterwards, she said I had great veins, and I was like, "Are you flirting with me?" Really can't gauge if you're straight or not, but what is this? What are we?
I like that.
Yeah, it's just cute as fuck.
Vein-based romance.
Yeah, I just love that she loves my blood, you know? She took a bit of blood from me and a bit of my heart.
I love how we're already talking about blood before we even need to. It's
true.
Thematically appropriate.
Very on point for this episode. Yeah, so I've been going to the doctor and trying to sort out what's wrong with me. That's kind of been the big point of my week, is this dumb ongoing medical issue. But other than that, you know, what is there in my life at the moment?
You've had like uni work and stuff.
Oh, yeah, uni.
You've still been doing stuff.
Yeah, no, I've been keeping busy with my uni work and my work. And hang on, I got more. I swear I can dig a bit deeper. Hang on. This podcast.
This is
the cats.
This is solid podcasting.
This is my life, guys. We're in stage 4 lockdown. There's so little to report on. The fact that I had a good interaction with a pathologist was like the highlight of my week. I was like, oh my God, like I'm talking to a stranger and she's cute. And is this flirting? I don't know. Maybe like, is this what life is?
I can't even remember the last time I spoke to a human being who wasn't the people I live with.
Exactly. That's why it was almost just like excitingly refreshing to talk to a new person and have a good connection with them. You know, how life usually was before this all happened.
I feel like my brain is going to slowly forget what other human beings look like. And when they don't look like you or Brooke, I'm just going to be startled.
Exactly.
Like I'm retraining my brain to think all human beings look like you, Ted.
Hey, I'm single in lockdown. It's rare to have like a human touch. And when the pathologist grabbed my arm, I was like, oh.
That's how touch-starved you've become.
She said I had lovely eyeshadow. Again, I'm pretty sure I'm in. Should just go back there and be like, what are you doing tonight? Obviously nothing.
Yeah, and also be like, I can't come over, but we could call.
Yeah. That's also the problem with being in lockdown. I hate calling people. I hate video chatting with people. As much as I love my friends and I love seeing them, video chatting always takes it out of me for some reason. It's way more draining than just hanging out with someone.
I think both of us are people that rely a lot on body language, both for us to communicate with others and also to read other people.
Yeah.
Just in the way we talk. Because I know for me, that's the problem with voice chatting, is like, it's a lot harder to read other people, and I find it a lot harder to communicate because I gesticulate a lot.
Yeah, and I also have this, I hate looking at myself staring back at me. Like, I don't like having to see my own face while I'm hanging out with a friend. It makes me a lot more like self-aware and self-conscious. And just the emotion of that is what drains me in the interaction. It's just, I can't stop looking at my own face and being like, do I really look like that?
Yeah.
And that's just like a really deep-seated hatred of my body image that I really need to go to therapy for. But, yeah, I really miss just hanging out with people. And my favorite thing to do with friends is, even if we're hanging out, just like not saying anything for a while. And I feel like that's weirder on video chat, you know?
It is. There's this compulsion to fill the silence, which like is a general social thing. But like, I feel like we're comfortable enough with our close friends to have moments of silence, but you can't in a video thing.
It's just weirder in a video chat. You're like, well, we're spending this time doing this. We may as well try and use the most of it. I just miss going over to a friend's house and sitting on the couch and just like not talking to them for 2 hours while we watch something.
Yeah.
It's my favorite way to hang out with a friend, is to not really have to say anything to them.
Also, you can't really like do the overlapping conversation that is integral to a lot of modern conversations. You know, you talk and the other person sort of pipes in while you're speaking, and that can be a good back and forth. But like the way that video chat audio compression works is that it'll silence one of you when you try and do that. So
Yeah,
it's,
and that's the thing. I hate talking over people on
Mm.
video chat. Like in real life, it's fine, but in video chat, if you talk over each other, then you don't hear each other, and you have to be like, "What did you say? Sorry," and just
Yeah.
like those awkward little silences and the way it stunts the conversation. I'm not into, and that's also the problem with uni, is that I feel like I don't engage as much in uni via video chat because I'm afraid that like my Wi-Fi will be bad, or I'll talk over someone,
Yeah.
or people won't be able to hear me very well. I just like worry about all of the little tech issues that might happen if I contribute to any conversation. So I then don't.
Yeah.
I miss being in a classroom and being more like outspoken and engaging more, but I just don't like it in Zoom.
I miss being in a classroom as well. Like from a teaching perspective, I can tell when I'm teaching that they're struggling more to engage. Like I teach kind of dry material sometimes, but I try and make it engaging. But like it's way harder to make it engaging when I'm sitting at my desk than when I'm like moving physically around a room and trying to like point at a giant screen of Avid Media Composer and going like, wow, that's fucking cool. I can't do that when I'm like, are you guys looking at your screen? Isn't that cool?
Yeah, I think I was saying that I also felt like I was more tired during an online like Zoom session
Yeah.
for class. And it's because you don't have the communal energy of just like being in a classroom with other people. There is something about being physically close to other people and having that energy in the room that makes you engaged more. But if I'm just sitting in my bedroom and I've got a screen on that I can turn the video off, I can turn my audio off, then I don't actually have to be there, and then I just totally tap out.
Yeah, I get the feeling that at least a fifth to a quarter of my students aren't even paying any attention whatsoever. That it's because they're just video off, audio off. And I know there's people like that who are still paying attention. But some of them I'm like, you didn't pay attention when you're physically there. You're here so that I mark you as there. And that, I don't know, it's draining. It's deflating. But on a positive note, I had the circuits arrive for my PlayStation, Raspberry Pi and a PlayStation thing. And it's been good. I feel very overwhelmed, to be honest. I had it arrive. I tried to set it up last night, and I was like, okay, I have a general idea of the arrangement, but getting everything to fit and be connected and learning how to solder it all together, like, boy, am I super underskilled for this project.
It's okay. I'll be in the same boat as you when my Bunnings supplies arrive.
Yeah.
When I'm trying to fucking put together a huge cabinet when I've never joined one piece of wood in my life. We'll be in the same boat together, just in different planes of existence.
Planes of existence?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll be all 2D and you'll be
I'll be like 4D, but in The Simpsons when Homer's in that weird.
Well, that was him being
realm.
3D.
Didn't they call it 4D?
But that's crazy because the whole gag from an audience perspective was that rather than being a flat 2D character, he was now a 3D character.
I know, but didn't they call it the fourth dimension?
I don't know.
I'm just going to look it up.
I also feel like I watched that episode at the beginning of a movie one time when I was younger.
Yeah, they used to run it before movies.
Yeah, I always thought it was a movie. I didn't realize it was an actual, just normal episode.
I'm pretty sure it's a Treehouse of Horror one.
Is it?
Let me look. It is a Treehouse of Horror episode from season 7. And it is totally third dimension. Either way, I will be with you in the same boat.
Yeah.
In the third dimension.
Speaking of things we don't understand very well.
Oh, is this a segue?
It
Are you directing us down into the actual purpose of the episode?
I am.
That's like crazy right now. I don't think I can do that. I'm out. That's too much for me.
The fuck? So, Twilight, New Moon. Neither of us have watched any of Twilight before watching Twilight and then New Moon within the space of a few days. And like, they're way worse than I expected. I mean, when people, for example, were super fanny about the Hunger Games or even the Divergent series, like all of those young adult series that are aimed at female audiences, right? Like all of them are mostly like treated like they're a 9 out of 10, but they're actually like a 6 or 7, right? They're like pretty good, but they're not fantastic. This was always like put in the same realm as those, and this was way worse than that. Like,
it was really interesting coming into this one.
Yeah.
Because you and I have never watched Twilight. We
Never.
were people that quite stubbornly resisted the craze, resisted the the fad that it was.
Yeah.
We never read the books. We never watched the movies.
I was never like
We were too
anti.
cool for school.
Yeah, just
But-
too cool.
Yeah, so it totally went over our heads as like a part of growing up. So coming into the Twilight series as an adult, wowie.
What a wild thing to be thrust into like 5 years after it's no longer in pop culture.
I will say, watching it has made a lot of TikToks make more sense. Twilight seems to be like the sensation of TikTok at the moment, making
Oh.
fun of Twilight, making fun of the performances and the music.
Because there was the new book that came out. Yeah, so there's a new book released, Midnight Sun, which is the events of Twilight from Edward Cullen's perspective, which I think is why it's in the general pop arena again.
Right.
Like that's probably why it's in a lot of TikToks, as people are being like thrust into their youth again as Twilight fans.
I also think that TikTok is such like a place of nostalgia. So everyone's
Yeah.
thinking like TikTok, Twilight was such a big part of a lot of millennials'
Yeah.
puberty. And so I think a lot of them are just revisiting it being like, man, wasn't it trash? And it was.
It really is. Like again, here's the arc that I've had. We watched Twilight 1 and I went, wow, this is actually significantly worse than I kind of expected it to be, given that it's not only not on the list, but how respected it was as a piece of pop culture. And then we watched New Moon and it kind of made me go, oh, Twilight 1 did a lot that I appreciate now, seeing it done poorly. Like I really, for the first like third of New Moon, I was like, oh, this kind of seems better. It's less silly.
Yeah, it's like visually it's better. I mean, like you can already see the quality. No, I feel like the characters look a bit more mature and like the color grading is better and some of the shot compositions were nicer.
But it also makes the whole thing more boring. I feel
Well,
like
that's what I'm gonna say is
Yeah.
that like I was fooled into thinking that New Moon would be a bit better than Twilight 1 at the start.
yeah.
And then I realized that New Moon suffered what Twilight 1 didn't, which is that it was boring.
It's so boring.
The first one wasn't boring because it was so outlandishly bad.
Yeah.
That it was kind of engaging and fun. But the second one, New Moon was just a disaster because it was just so dull.
This is the first movie on this list that we've watched that like was just boring. Like there's some silliness in it, but I don't know, like the baseball scene in Twilight 1 is such batshit craziness, right? But New Moon had nothing as much of a cultural moment as that is. So I got to give
Exactly.
it credit, man.
And I honestly think that New Moon, I would wager, which is a word that I couldn't grasp last episode. I would wager that about maybe it was a 2-hour long film. Maybe 30 minutes of the film were long stares at each other
Oh my
between
God.
Bella, Edward, and Jacob.
Yeah.
Just long pauses.
You
The
could-
pauses were criminal.
You could cut probably 40 minutes out of it without it changing anything.
Yeah, and it would have a way better pace and
Yeah.
be way more engaging.
Let me do the overview.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell us about this film. Give us the plot.
So, the brief plot of the film is several months after the first film, Bella has dinner with the Cullens to celebrate her 18th birthday. But after a small injury causes a big disturbance to the events, Edward is left shaken. Seeing their vampire human romance is destined to leave her in danger, Edward tells Bella that he and his family are leaving Forks forever. Taking the news poorly, Bella is depressed for months, seeing visions of Edward everywhere. Eventually, she finds comfort in Jacob Black, the local Quileute member, and the two form a close bond. Eventually, she's confronted by the vampire Laurent, and this leads her to discover that Jacob is amongst the tribe members who are secretly werewolves. Whilst fleeing from Laurent's companion Victoria, she flings herself off a cliff, seemingly to her death. Believing her to be dead, Edward leaves for Italy to put himself before the Vampire Council of Volturi, leaving Bella and Alice Cullen to chase after him to show that Bella is alive, in the process bringing her to the attention of the Volturi. Once they return, the Cullen family vote to turn Bella into a vampire as well once she graduates from high school, but Edward has one stipulation, that Bella will marry him.
And what a cliffhanger that was. Will she say yes?
That moment maybe bothered
we
me
care?
more than anything else. He's so weird as a character. He's the absolute worst.
It's just so bold of these films to assume that we should care about this love story. I know
Yes.
that's what it's based on, and so many teenagers were obsessed with it. But when you watch it as an adult, when you watch it with no nostalgia attached, how dare you how dare you try and make us get on side with these characters?
Yeah, Edward is definitely the least sympathetic character out of everybody.
He's an absolute sociopath.
He's a bad person.
He's an awful boyfriend.
He's a weird stalker.
He's miserable as well. That's the problem with Bella and him, is that I think this film confuses conflict with characters being moody.
Yes.
You know, because every shot is Bella looking away and she's deep in thought, or she's in a bad mood, or they just try and use Bella's mood to create conflict, and that doesn't work.
A character being sad isn't a scene. A character being sad because of something, or a character being sad and then something happens is a scene, right?
Yeah.
There needs to be an additional conflict to that emotional state.
100%.
Otherwise, it's not a scene. It's.
And I keep thinking about Kristen Stewart.
Yes.
And
she's so
Rob
good.
Pattinson. She's a great actress.
Both of them are phenomenal.
Both of them are really talented. And I feel like in the first one, even though their performances were still like shocking, they kind of I'm sure at that point they didn't realize that they were going to be in for a series of terrible films.
No.
It was exciting. They had just been discovered. They had just been signed on. I heard that like Robert Pattinson was basically doing method acting to get ready for Edward. Like he'd moved to America and like that's how he got his accent so refined.
He was keen for it.
But in this film, I almost felt like you could see that their performances were better because they were a bit more relaxed because they knew that the films were shit.
Yeah.
Like they were one movie deep at that point, and Twilight probably came out, and they're both smart enough to recognize that it was a shit film.
Yeah.
And so now, because they can relax, their performances are way more natural.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a lot less stiff in this one. Kristen Stewart, I thought was better in this one because she didn't spend the whole movie looking like she was about to sneeze.
Or like her eyes fluttering a lot and then biting her lips and looking around.
But Taylor Lautner is still the only one who wants to be there.
Yeah.
I still get the vibe that they don't want to be there, but he's kind of given it.
He's giving it, but I feel that's tragic because I actually think he gives one of the worst performances.
Well, yeah, he's got a limited range as an actor.
Yeah.
He's a good guy and he tries hard, but
and he has a great chin. Great cleft,
what a
you know?
distinct attribute
As if
to
you
focus
weren't spending every scene looking at his chin.
I wasn't.
Sculpted.
I wasn't.
Oh, every time I'd take off a shirt, I was like, but where that chin
I mean,
at?
the first half of the movie, I was spent obsessively looking at his long hair wig. And then the second half, I spent looking at his jean shorts.
His jorts.
His
How'd you
jorts,
call them
sorry.
the right name. Fuck around here.
I don't know why werewolves have to, at all times, be shortless and wear either jean shorts or cargo shorts. I don't know why that's the uniform of a werewolf.
Is it just because they're cheap, so when they turn into a werewolf and they rip off their bodies, they're easy to replace?
Oh, maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, I mean, like, we learnt a lot from What We Can Do in the Shadows.
Yeah.
What we can do in the shadows. what we do in the shadows.
What can we do in the shadows?
What can we do in the shadows sounds so helpful.
Yeah.
Did I say helpful? I meant hopeful. Oh my God, just cut that whole bit. My brain collapsed. But yeah, we learnt a lot from What We Do in the Shadows, and you have to wear the appropriate clothing if you're going to transform. So maybe they're just thinking ahead.
Well, but they specifically point out in that jeans of any kind, bad choice.
I know, but they're going to rip off no matter what. So maybe they're just like on special at Walmart.
Well, there was the one guy, I think his name was Embry, was just wearing cargo shorts.
Embry?
I think that was his. Well, yeah. I mean, I didn't name him.
As you're steering this episode today, you're responsible for New Moon entirely.
It's my
I have a lot of
personal
questions.
responsibility.
Firstly, who gave you the right?
Summer entertainment.
Secondly, what was going on in your mind when you made this damn film?
Absolute lack of attention to detail.
Thirdly, was Taylor Lautner's chin as firm as it looks?
No, way softer.
Like a baby.
Like
baby
a spongy.
Spongy.
Mm-hmm.
So when you push it in, a bit of liquid comes out.
Well, you know how like a sponge is like, it's stiff and firm, it holds its shape, but when you touch it, completely soft.
Yeah.
There's no bone in his chin. That's always how I imagined the, like the Egyptian pharaoh look with the long square beard. I imagine that isn't all beard. It is in fact skin and bone, but it's spongy.
The fact that there'd be a bone in that chin. It's a proper bone. It's like a tail on the face.
The pharaohs would use it to execute.
Also, I must say, when you say that it's firm to look at but soft to the touch, it's definitely also a description of my mental state at the moment.
That could be a description, like that could be a line in this movie because it's sounds sexual adjacent without actually being sexual, which is what a lot of this movie is.
We derived a lot of joy from scenes where it wasn't sexual at all, but you could place their lines into a sex scene and it would absolutely translate.
There's a lot of scenes that
I'm
work
coming.
You're not coming.
I don't want you to come.
That was it. Oh, fuck. That's so
Bella.
good. A lot of this movie is just orgasm denial.
Going into the plot of it, I feel like...
What plot for the first 40 minutes of this? Nothing happens.
No, because when you think about it, the inciting incident of the film, what gets the ball rolling in this story is that Edward breaks up with Bella to, quote, protect her.
But then the crossing the threshold would be her getting to know Jacob, and that's like 40 minutes later.
Yeah. Oh, it's not well structured, but that is the structure of it.
Yeah.
If we're looking at turning points, if we're looking at beats, that is the inciting incident. The turning point is her realizing that she can be in touch with Edward by getting an adrenaline rush. And she has a really weird notion of what will give her an adrenaline rush, you know?
Very motorbike based.
Very motorbike based. She spends months putting these motorcycles together to only use it once.
We can't talk about her wanting an adrenaline rush without addressing what is definitely the goofiest thing, which is her ghostly visions of of Edward, torso up, wearing a suit, just sort of being there. Like, I don't know, if you're going to...
Stop.
Yeah.
Please don't.
It wouldn't be like these flashy visions or something that would be visually exciting, and it wouldn't be just like a voice that's playing with her head. Is it in her mind or is it really his power?
Yeah.
It was instead just a semi-translucent torso up shot of Edward, mostly to the side of her in the shot going, don't. You promised you wouldn't.
You promised.
It's
Bella. And it's like, you left her, dude. What are you being possessive for? Get the fuck out. You were toxic. You're a bad man.
He's taking the place of the spooky ghost. I wish was the third in the trifecta of the
No,
spooky
didn't we say we
animals.
we wanted her to have a spooky mummy boyfriend?
I said spooky mummy
I
boyfriend.
think a mummy would be great.
I take it back. I want it to be a ghost.
I want it to be a mummy. I
Yeah.
feel like Edward's already cold and kind of ghostly, but a mummy is like a whole different field that we're working
That's
with.
true.
Yeah, I wanted to have a cool mummy boyfriend in the third film. God, I hope that's what Eclipse is about. It's her mummy, and then Anubis is after them.
Yes. He's scared that she'll catch his mummy's curse.
Talking about what gets the ball rolling in this film, by the way, Edward decides that he should leave because he realizes that it'll be too hard to date Bella because like his whole family want to eat her.
That's his
essentially.
secret motivation.
Yeah, but he says that they need to move away because Carlisle is 50, but he keeps saying, he should be 50, but he still looks 40.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the film, when everything's resolved and they're back and forks, that's not a problem anymore.
No. Which means, was he completely like... Well, I mean, we also addressed Carlisle. We don't know whether Carlisle has been there for way longer than everybody else.
Yeah.
But also, like, it's way more noticeable that 17-year-olds aren't aging than someone who's 50 looking 40. I mean, he's a relatively wealthy doctor. Like, he's fine. He's the least suspicious of any of them.
Yeah.
The fact that they move away, I don't understand. Yeah. So did he just completely lie?
Well, I also don't understand because we were talking about how does this family work, right? Like, how does the Cullen family work? They're all family, but also Rosalie and the other dude are dating,
Well,
and then Alice and Jasper are dating.
I stand
They're not
by
siblings, but they act like siblings.
I stand by Carlisle and Esme were actually married. They say that in Twilight 1, but Carlisle was already a vampire.
And obviously none of these people are related because they've all been bitten by Carlisle and he's made them into a makeshift family.
We don't know if they've all been bitten by Carlisle.
I assume that they have.
We know that Esme and Edward have, but they mentioned Jasper as the newest vegetarian as opposed to our newest vampire. So that makes me think that they're just like the vampires that don't want to eat humans, rather than specifically vampires turned by Carlisle.
So they're just a club.
Yeah.
But they all have the same
then
surname.
Take the last name Cullen, I guess, as a clan name.
But that's so weird. So why do they have couples in this family and they go to school and everyone knows that they are Cullens and that they're dating?
Yeah, well,
that's so weird.
I got the impression from Anna Kendrick describing them in the first one. And by the way, she's definitely the best person in this.
Yeah.
I read all of her lines are improvised, and that's why they're the funniest.
Oh.
That's why they're so natural. She's a funny person. Yeah, well, I got the impression from the first one that like the student buddy doesn't know that they're dating, but can tell that it's weird how close they are.
Oh, that's worse.
That is worse.
Because they're like holding hands around the school, I swear.
Yeah,
What?
yeah. So they're ostensibly related to everyone else, but we the audience know that they're just vampires.
America's weird, man. Like, in this school, there's like at least 2 couples that are probably brother and sister dating, and everyone's like, yeah.
Yeah, if there were a brother and sister at my school who were super close, that would be all everyone would talk about.
I was gonna say, I loved that, like, so Bella is left by Edward and she's devastated for weeks and months, and her friends are really mean to her about it, being like, oh my god, you're so depressed and it's the worst, and get over it. And then she falls on the comfort of Jacob, and then they start having a romantic thing that's forming. And then she jumps off a cliff. Edward sees it in a vision, and like in Romeo and Juliet, he's like, Bella's dead, so I'm dead.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen Edward for the whole movie. Like, apart from the first act where he's like, goodbye, and then he's gone. The fact that we can suddenly go back to him and we're following him trying to kill himself, I'm like, where have you been, man? Like, what have you been doing?
Well, we see in the one shot of him before that where he's on the phone to Jacob that he's in Rio.
Yeah, well, he looks like he's in Rio. He's got the famous Jesus statue behind him.
Yeah.
You know, the Jesus statue.
Classic Jesus statue.
I don't think it actually has a name. It is just the Jesus
I'm pretty
statue.
sure it's called the Cristo Redentor.
Can you not?
Okay.
Anyway.
Get cultured, sweaty.
And so he wants to go and kill himself. So he goes to the ancient clan of vampires in Italy.
Yeah. Who seem like they run vampires, but only sort of.
And I was so disappointed to see Michael Sheen just pop up in this.
Yeah.
He's better than that.
If it makes you feel any better, he auditioned and got the role without knowing anything about the character, their motivations, anything about the story. Everything he knows about Twilight is from his daughter, who is a fan.
I was thinking, I was like, I bet he only signed on for this because he has a fucking child or a relation that was like, I love Twilight, please be in Twilight. It's why Richard Griffith was in Harry Potter. He knew nothing about Harry Potter, and his granddaughter loved the books. So then when they were like, do you want to play Dumbledore? He was like, yeah, fuck yeah, all right, I'll do it.
There was a similar thing where Sean Connery was in some movie so that he could... it was a movie for either Sony or Nintendo or something, and he only signed on so that he could get free game consoles for his grandchildren, which I think is funny because he's wealthy enough to buy them. They're not so expensive that Sean Connery can't afford them.
Sean Connery is such a fucking legend.
Yeah.
Like, I loved him being in Time Bandits, and apparently he was just like, he was so professional on set, and Terry Gilliam had such little experience directing that the first day was a disaster, and Sean Connery pulled him aside. It happened to be one of the days of shooting with Sean Connery, and they only had like 2 or 3. It was super brief. And he pulled him aside and he was like, hey mate, here's some tips on how to direct. And Terry Gilliam was like, thank you so much.
Here's how to direct.
Time Bandits. So dumb.
But yeah, I don't know. Also, I don't know. One thing I felt conflicted about was the world building in this one. Because I'm a fantasy nerd and I like lore in general. So like I have literally looked up the lore for franchises I don't care about because I just kind of like reading about a world. So them adding all the stuff with the Volturi, it both made me go like, okay, something's going on, but it also feels so dissonant currently with not only all of Twilight 1, but also the first 2/3 of New Moon.
You know, the best place to set up lore is in the first film.
Yes.
Think of Lord of the Rings. They set up the lore in the first 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, the whole over, like the voiceover with Cate Blanchett explaining the history of the ring, who had the ring, who currently has the ring, gives us everything we need to know. The fact that we're now only learning about the history of the vampires in the second film is ridiculous.
They briefly mentioned the word Volturi and then a really intense and sexual conversation and suicidal conversation between Edward and Bella in the middle of a science class.
Every conversation they have
is both sexual and suicidal. That's true. That mentions the Volturi and then it's dropped until the end. But it felt so clunky because I'm like, did this exist previously? It just felt weird and odd.
But what I love is that he's like, well, Bella's dead, so I'm going to die, and I'm going to sacrifice myself by walking out into the sunlight and showing my sparkly bod to this whole festival of people. And Bella suddenly gets on a plane to Italy with Alice.
I really wanted to see the scene of Edward on a plane.
Yeah, I wanted to see just like Bella and Alice just catching a flight together,
Yeah.
goofing around together.
In the airline queue.
Yeah,
Going
it could
through
have been
TSA.
like a buddy trip kind of movie, you know?
That could have been fun.
Yeah.
That would have been kind of a fun second half of a movie.
Eurotrip too.
That we've referenced Eurotrip so many times in this podcast, and there's so few episodes.
Only
of it.
once before, and I feel like we should have done more. Eurotrip deserves more. So they get to Italy and they get to this town, and Alice drops her off and she has to run through a crowd of people, and Edward's stepping out and he's taking off his clothes and he's sparkling a bit, and she jumps through a fountain and grabs him, and then instead of just pushing him back into the shade, she just holds him and she's like, you have to move.
Yeah.
And it's meant to be this big grand moment of like, it's meant to be like full of suspense and excitement and will she make it or not? And it's just so lackluster. It's so
flat.
badly done.
Yeah.
I thought that for me was kind of like the cherry on top of the cake that is this movie. I thought that was just a paramount example of how this film doesn't know how to make anything engaging.
It really doesn't. Like, this is what I was saying with the world building is like, it has like things in it that I'm like, I can see how this could be interesting. You know, like it's not like it's an inherently flawed premise, right? Unlike say like Meet the Blacks or Zoolander 2, where like the whole potential of the movie is nothing. This, like, there's a lot of nuggets in here that could be good, but everyone involved doesn't know how to make it interesting, which is crazy to me. The writer was Melissa Rosenberg, who wrote the first 4 seasons of Dexter. Like, she was one of the heads of the WGA. Like, she's a good writer.
Obviously not in Twilight.
No!
These films suck. It's upsetting that the only bit of it that was good was improvised by Anna Kendrick.
I know! It's wild. God, it was just such a, I feel like we've skipped over the whole first half of the movie, but that's because nothing happens.
Nothing happened.
Nothing happens except for lots of sort of... no, one thing I will say that did happen is a more believable relationship occurred between Bella and Jacob than I expected.
Yeah, I started thinking that if I had ever been like a Twilight girl back in fucking 2008, I would have been Team Jacob.
I would have been Team Jacob
yeah.
too. Yeah,
he's like way nicer. He's not a fucking freak like
he's
Edward
nicer.
is.
He's
Treats
not
her
a
right.
stalker. We see an actual believable relationship build between them. He's a human. He's a person instead of someone's idea of a person.
We couldn't stop laughing when we were watching the first one because we obviously watched the first one to prepare for this. I've been thinking ever since we watched it about the first scene that where Bella has to go to her science class and next to her is Edward and he sees her and he gets a whiff of her and he literally looks like he's gonna vomit. Like he puts his hand to his mouth and he almost just like gags. And she's like sniffing her clothing, being like, do I smell? That scene for me was actually one of the funniest things I've ever watched.
I think Twilight 1 would have been good if they were more winking, right?
Yeah.
Because it was funny sometimes. The baseball scene was silly. If they like winked at the audience a little bit, I would have gone, what a blast. But it was so serious.
Yeah.
This has the same problem, except there's not even anything that's silly.
Yeah.
That if they winked, I would have just gone, ugh.
100%. And when they have like that final confrontation with Michael Sheen's ancient clan of vampires, at first there's an interesting fight scene. I got excited. I was like, oh wow, like this is interestingly choreographed and kind of well shot. And like Edward's trying to protect Bella. It was kind of interesting. And then it resolved by them being like, don't worry, Bella's going to become a vampire. Leave it with us. And they're like, cool.
Yeah.
Go home.
Well, because they're presented to the audience as villains, but they're treated by the characters as if they're not really villains.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I'm meant to understand about them.
And then the film just ends with like Jacob and Edward fighting because Jacob is no longer going to be with Bella. And then Edward proposing to her.
Yeah.
And that's like the cliffhanger moment. And God, that scene was shockingly long. He's like, Bella, you have to do something first. And she's like, what? Marry me. And that's the end.
And you did it in maybe half the time.
Yeah, no, I rushed that. What I'm excited for is the fact that we obviously have Breaking Dawn that's going to be in the list far later.
So we'll have to watch Eclipse, even though it's not on this list.
And again, my prediction is going to be a spooky mummy boyfriend. What's your prediction for Eclipse?
I think I think my prediction is, if not a spooky ghost, I think there's going to be way more vampire v werewolf fighting. And I think they're still going to really focus on Victoria, one of the 3 vampires that we see 2/3 of the way through Twilight 1.
Yeah.
I can't believe we're still focusing on them. They felt like such throwaway characters.
Yeah.
I wish more weight was given to them in the first one. And then I'd go, oh, fuck.
I love how they had this interesting antagonistic force. I was kind of excited. I was like, oh, Victoria's creepy and she's trying to track down Bella. She's trying to kill Bella. And then Jacob pursues her into the ocean about halfway through the movie, maybe towards the second act turn, and we just never see her again.
Yeah.
She doesn't come back.
They're sort of villains by proxy. They're not really... Like, we know that they're not the overarching villains, but they're going to be villains for like 3 out of 5 of them.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me.
I think in the third film, when Bella does find her spooky mummy boyfriend, what's going to happen is that Edward will leave her again, or he'll die tragically. So she'll go to Jacob, and Jacob will be like, I have to protect you. I don't want you to come with me. And then he fucks off. And she's like, oh my God. And then she meets a spooky mummy boy at school. And like he sees her and he's like, and then she always notices that he goes into the crypts of the school during lunchtime. And she finds him in his tomb, right? Yeah. And then when they fall in love, he's like, I can't protect you. You need to become a mummy or we can't be together. And she's like, I want to do it. I want to be in your tomb. I want to be with you forever. And then Anubis shows up and he's like, time to die, bitches. And then they have a fight sequence. And then the spooky mummy boyfriend dies and Edward comes back.
Nice.
That's going to be Eclipse.
I like that.
I'm like 95% sure I'm right.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Can I tell you some of the trivia? Because
I
did so much research for this one because this is the first one where I could really go ham on doing research.
Yeah.
So for one thing, so Catherine Hardwicke did the first Twilight, but she was replaced with Chris Weitz, who did Golden Compass and American Pie.
Okay. He did it all okay.
I know, right? Which really tells you a lot of why this is flat and boring.
It also explains why American Compass. Explains why Golden Compass was shit.
Yes.
Anyway.
Well, he actually said he liked working on this more than Golden Compass because Golden Compass had tons of studio interference and this didn't. But they both feel similarly bad. So whatever.
Maybe he's the common denominator.
So initially there was rumors that Catherine Hardwicke left because of scheduling difficulties, which is always code for fired. But she apparently said that she couldn't be fired because in her contract she had first right of refusal. She turned it down because the studio wanted to rush it. And she said, I do not regret it at all. Thank the Lord. The truth is, I liked the first book the best. So it turns out that she just really fucking hated that the studio wanted to rush her. And watching this feels rushed.
Yeah.
The pacing feels slow, but the filming is definitely, I don't know, like I said, like Twilight 1 is bad, but there's more attention to it paid craft-wise, whether that's good or bad, than this was.
Yeah, I did like look up a bit of trivia about Twilight 1 only.
Yeah.
And like it seems like Catherine Hardwicke had a lot of care and love that she put into the film.
Yeah.
Even though it was shit, she took a long time casting it. It was a very intimate process of getting the right characters and making sure they had chemistry and getting them rehearsed. So like I feel like she had a lot of love for it.
Yeah.
Like, which is why at first again I thought Twilight 1 was worse, but I was wrong.
Yes.
Twilight 2, like Twilight New Moon sucks way more because it doesn't have the same love and care.
I think by Breaking Dawn, we're going to be genuine fans of Twilight 1.
Yeah.
Because I can already feel that happening. What do you think the budget was?
Oh, God. I mean, because Twilight 1 had been a success and the books were so successful, I imagine, and it had a lot of CGI, I imagine it had a big budget. I'm going to say 100 mil.
50 mil.
Wow.
And it made 700 million, which means it made almost double what the first movie did.
It made 14 times 14 profit.
Yeah.
Wow.
So like it went off.
Ooh.
This is my favorite fact about it. At the 2010 Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards, the film was nominated for Best Movie, but lost to Alvin and the Chipmunks, The Squeakquel.
Which is on the list, which is on the list!
What a shocking year this was for kids' movies.
I'm excited that one of us will get The Squeakquel and the other will get Chipwrecked.
I know, that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
I hope.
Fun is relative at this point.
Also, Peter Lambert, the editor, edited a portion of the film during his daily commute. So it might be the first major motion picture in which the biggest portion of the rough cut was edited in the back seat of a car.
You're kidding me. How did he set up his suite in the back of a car?
No, just on a laptop. You can edit even a big feature on a laptop with a hard drive.
At least 4 monitors. with Da Vinci running on one, a movie running on the other, just for entertainment and for reference, obviously. And then, Avid and another, and
Avid can just be 2 screens.
Yeah, you're the editor.
Yeah. Well, I'm a professional editor, and I can say the lack of focus I would have on doing a rough cut if I was in a car really explains the shocking pacing in this movie. Yeah, that was the main trivia that I got. One thing that I really, really did want to talk about before we get onto quotes and reviews and stuff is the Native American First Nations appropriation. So it's the first Twilight movie that we're doing, and it's the one that's the most Jacob heavy. So I felt compelled to talk about it. I didn't want to do the white feminist thing of talking for groups that aren't your own and sort of misrepresenting what they actually would think. I didn't know, for example, that the Quileute are a real people who actually live in that region, as is Forks is a real town next to it. So Anne Penn Charles, who is a Quileute member, has said that a lot of young Twilight fans have started visiting the reservation, expecting to find the real locations and real werewolves.
Oh my God.
Which is weird.
Yeah.
But what's been interesting is reading about how a lot of the local people really wanted to be welcoming and actually share culture and stuff. What's uncomfortable is how much they haven't been included in any of the profit-making merchandise off of their shit. So a lot of the Quileute people have said we genuinely liked seeing our culture represented on screen. A lot of them went to the screening of New Moon and said they had a really good time. All of the actors, apart from Taylor Lautner, are actually Native. Taylor Lautner is allegedly distantly Native. And there's been I read a bunch of people who said they didn't mind and just was glad to see it on screen. And a bunch of people who said they really found it offensive, but appreciated that everyone else, apparently they had to bring a record showing their First Nations heritage to be on the film, apart from Taylor Lautner, which is weird. But yeah, so it sounds like from what I read that the biggest problem was to do with Nordstrom's and a lot of Summer Entertainment's merchandise was using Quileute symbology and kind of trying to sell and market off of it, and none of that went to the Quileute people. So this is a case of a group of people who really want to be open and share and are just still being excluded from the process. I don't know. I thought it was really interesting how I was ready to go in being this is fucked, and kind of reading it's a lot more complicated than that. Especially given a lot of people were talking about how even though it looks weird 10 years on, at the time it was one of the first major Hollywood movies at which First Nations people had complicated, rich backstories and weren't villainous and were just dressed like normal people and
complicated, rich backstories.
Alleged. That's
no. No.
I didn't write those quotes.
Disagree on that, but absolutely excited that they did get representation in such a successful film.
Yeah, and how it wasn't there wasn't anyone named Howling Creek or anything. It was more how actual modern First Nations people live and are and stuff. I don't know. I thought it was interesting how gung-ho I went in being okay, I'm going to see what people think. And a lot more of the actual First Nations voices that I read were still acknowledged the bad, but also wanted to acknowledge the good.
Well, that's the thing. I think we found in this process that even though these films are terrible, there is something always positive you can pull out of it.
Yeah.
Maybe not for Zoolander 2, but for the rest of them, there was something fun and positive that we could find, and that's nice to know about this film, that it had a positive effect for a marginalized community.
Yeah, I thought that was sort of interesting. But so I want to give you some quotes that I found. I've just found 2 particular quotes of reviews and stuff.
Okay.
So Mick Lazelle from the San Francisco Chronicle stated, expect this film to satisfy its fans. Everybody else get ready for a bizarre soap opera consisting of a succession of static scenes with characters loping into the frame to announce exactly what they're thinking. I thought that was pretty accurate. You know, it really is a movie in which everyone just says what they're thinking. There's definitely no reading between the lines in Twilight. And Roger Ebert, who we mentioned last week, gave the film 1 star out of 4
Ah.
and said takes the tepid achievement of Twilight, guts it, and leaves it for undead.
Well said.
Which I liked,
Well
yeah.
said indeed.
So what's your score?
There is always like a certain sense of fun in watching through a franchise of films, you know, even if you don't like it. Like, I'm not a Marvel person, but also if someone was like, do you want to watch through the Marvel films? I'd be like, you know what? Yeah, like it's such a relevant thing in pop culture. I want to understand what people are always talking about.
Yeah.
So I've kind of enjoyed going through Twilight. I'm going to give Twilight New Moon, in my personal scoring, a 4 out of 10.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I was going to go for a 4 as well.
Yeah.
I think, even though it's still a bad movie, I do kind of think it was better than the ones we've watched so far.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, it was sloppy and boring, but that's a lot.
That's me on a Sunday.
It's a lot better of a crime than we've seen committed so far. Like,
Yeah.
Nothing to Lose and God's Not Dead should have been way lower on this list.
Yeah, for
This
sure.
kind of deserves to be this high on the list.
Mm.
Like, I don't know. I thought it was a solid 4.
Yeah.
I probably won't watch it again, but I'm still thinking about it.
And it's nice to be it's nice to be in tune with what everyone's talking about.
I feel like I'm a part of something.
Me too. And it's just changed me as a person. Like,
Yeah.
I feel so accepted. Yeah, I am enjoying watching the films.
Yeah, I'm genuinely looking forward to when we do Breaking Dawn Part 1, which promises to be quite shocking.
I'm keen to see how Eclipse is slightly better than New Moon and worse than Twilight 1, and then suddenly Breaking Dawn is so much worse.
Mm.
I'm excited for that slight peak and then rapid descent.
Which is exactly how Edward would describe something to be incredibly sexual.
And I'm excited for the famous sex scene that's going to happen as well. I've heard a lot about the Twilight sex scene.
I've heard rumors of like sperm pulverizing her womb.
And then also Jacob wanting to fuck a baby. That's been like a joke that's been thrown around. So I'm keen to understand what the fuck is going to happen in the next 3 films.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for the spooky mummy boyfriend.
Obviously.
Yeah.
That's one of the best kept secrets about Twilight is the spooky mummy.
The fact that it actually merges into the mummy franchise.
Mm.
She starts dating Imhotep.
When Brendan Fraser comes in as the new Jacob Black, you would not believe it.
And then Bella and Evie have to fight it out for his love.
I like that.
Yeah.
I would watch that movie.
They're fighting in Forks and they find a secret underground tunnel that leads them into the tombs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Both
like
worlds.
that. I would watch that.
I wouldn't.
We've established that my bar for a movie I would watch for entertainment value is low.
It is. Yeah, that was Twilight New Moon.
What are we watching next week?
Next week, we'll be watching Jonah Hex.
I've read like 3 of the comics, and this proves to be a bad movie.
I know nothing about it, so I've got a lot of research cut out for me.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Let's do it.
Let's go!